Glenn mentioned his job as executive producer. That also involves sales. He just oversold me so well. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thanks for getting out into the chill and the cold. And I only say that because thanks to the Second Life people for putting on a bathrobe and slippers and walking to their computer. Really, I'm really flattered to be here. I'm going to extend those thanks to three particular people today. One of them, of course, is Glenn Entis, who hired me at PDI and really opened up a door for me that I could never, ever look back on without incredible humility and gratitude. The other person, Bruce Grenville, who followed Glenn's lead and was a phenomenal collaborator, an amazing artistic collaborator in helping me understand how to put together something like a museum exhibit. And finally, and far and away most importantly, I need to thank my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Eunice Radosevich. Yes, that was her name. A convenient rhyme that was both unkind and accurate with Mrs. Radosevich was used. And I will always be grateful to the old bat because she unintentionally introduced me to the crack cocaine of the art world, animation. You see, on the bottom right corner of my social studies primer, there was an opportunity for me to do one drawing and then another and another. And yes, of course, it was my first flip book. This first animation of mine involved a rather wet annihilation of Mrs. Radosevich by an enormous falling boulder, and it was glorious. And it was possible, of course, to not merely kill her, but to go backwards and reconstitute her to be crushed anew. And so I wasn't a 5th grader anymore. I was Thor, god of thunder. I was Kronos, deity of time, Shiva, destroyer of teachers. That first foray in animation, I just have never looked back. It is an addicting and marvelous and lifelong pursuit, and it had a magical power. Today I want to talk about animation. Animation is an art form. And I've sort of designed something along some sort of odd pathways, and you can see my title there. I want to look at the personal joys of animation, the professional methods of animation, and the real-world place that animation fits. It's animation in the mind, the movies, and the marketplace. Let me confess that these titles all are invented to sound like really cool for a museum audience. So, like, I came up with this one too: the personal, the practical, and the political. That's pretty good, right? I kind of dig that one. But what it really is stuff Tim thinks is cool. So let's dive in. What does it feel like to be an animator? And before I ask that, let me ask, how many people are animators tonight? How many people here are animators? Fantastic. I will be preaching to the converted. Chime in when I screw it up. What I wanted to do was talk about animation in the mind. What does it feel like to be an animator? And one of the reasons I think this is an interesting topic is because as a man who dabbles in music, and I'm very passionate about music, as somebody who draws and doodles, I feel like I've had the amateur contact with a variety of different arts. None of them, I believe, compare to animation. I'm going to give you a set of sort of analogies that are, I think, illustrative of why animation is a unique art form with its own challenges. The first one will be very familiar to Glenn Entis. The blindfolded sculptor. I would maintain that there is no other art form that involves as large a leap as animation. And that leap means what you control as an artist is not at all what your artistic product is. Dance, music, painting, writing, they all involve moments of transformation for the artist, certainly. But nothing like animation. The animator's business is motion. It really doesn't matter how well they draw. It matters how well things move. And yet, they cannot actually make anything move. They have to do keyframes, whether it's drawn around the computer or with clay, and they have to think of these still images and make the leap in the motion. An animator's vision is to see in a single frame the motion of an eye blink, a 24th of a second. The analogy of the blindfolded sculptor means, imagine you're given a lump of clay. And you go up and you're going to do a bust of somebody familiar to you. You're going to do their head and you look at them. I'm going to stare at Glenn. And then you reach for it, and then as you're reaching for it, somebody bags your head, blindfolds you. And all of a sudden, you're doing your best job, and I think Glenn's got 2 eyes, so there they are, and not 3 nostrils, there he is. And then when you finally want to look at your sculpture, you are straitjacketed. Your hands are shoved in your pocket, the hood is taken off, and you go, oh, that's not Glenn. That's not even human. I need to make a lot of changes. And as you reach for it again, what happens? Whomp! There goes that blindfold again. Animators don't get to actually move. They have to think ahead in ways that are an amazing leap, and anybody who animates knows that's a strange addiction, because no matter how bad that first pass is, the moment those hands get shoved in your pocket and the hood gets taken off, part of you, the part your friends are watching, goes, oh, but I'll tell you something, part of you also goes, wicked. It moves. Absolutely addicting. Now, the other thing I love about animation, and I'm going to quote my favorite guitarist, a guy named Michael Hedges, who is a phenomenal composer and guitarist. And he described the act of playing guitar as living in 3 time zones. He said, you're always listening and appreciating the note you have just played. You're trying to execute and pluck the string in the most flawless and emotional manner possible. And of course, you're anticipating the next note you're going to play. And he described the act of playing, especially playing live, as literally feeling himself turn into 3 different people, 3 distinct personalities. The aesthete enjoying what is going on, the man who is actually a precision instrument executing the moment, and the prognosticator of what's going to come next. That, to me, was exactly what an animator is doing. I have literally skipped more lunches as an animator than anybody in the world, because you are sitting there going, I've got the legs starting up. I know in 2 frames that's going to peak, but the fabric is falling from the last, so that's got 6 more frames. And somebody goes, sandwich, and you go, shut up! Can't you see what I'm doing? Animating. It sounds painful. It's absolutely addictive, and 10 hours of your life disappear like that when you're doing the marvelous mental process of juggling time in animation. Rex Grignon, who was mentioned by Glenn earlier, was my partner in forming that animation group. And at the time, we were doing Ants. PDI was in a very nice little 3-story building a few blocks away from where we would all go to lunch. Now, this made a convenient analogy for Ants, because what happened at lunch, the hive would send out drones to go get food and come back to the colony. But what Rex and I loved is we would be watching people, and you would look for pairs of people filing single file in front of one another as they walked on the sidewalk. And you would have these occasional moments where you'd in between them in your head. They would hit a stride together and you'd go, there they are. Da, 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 da. It's geeky, but it shows you that once you start in-betweening and thinking in keyframes, it extends to this kind of wonderful observation of turning life into 24ths of a second. Observing not merely motion, which is the job of a dancer and an actor, but an animator's job is to break that motion into discrete bits. Moments where, oh, that person peaks their knee right there. That's a keyframe. That's not merely an incidental moment. That's a very important moment. The other thing that we loved from that 3rd floor place was playing a game of identifying people coming back to PDI. This was a fairly long walk. I'm going to guess it was a little over a quarter of a mile. Way too distant to recognize the faces, or even sometimes the clothing, if you knew what they were wearing that day, of your coworkers. And yet Rex and I would stand there and we'd go, that's Glenn. Oh, there's Raman. We could recognize them because even though they were visually about the size of a pixel, the way they moved was so distinct that it occurred to us, and still seems true to me, that movement is identity more than any other feature we have. When you watch a friend of yours, you can see and recognize them from 1,000 feet away before their face, their outfit, their hair, whatever you might say is the thing that's the key. You actually, as a human being, recognize motion as much or more than anything.